Here I have a chart for the final day of 2025. We'll use it and a few other charts to guide a conversation about the astrology of 2025. It's been quite the year astrologically, a year of transitions, beginnings and endings. The endings may have felt slow, and the beginnings might have felt really, really fast. And it's been a year of personal growth. We worked on letting go of perfectionism, welcoming in more feelings of safety and security. And we challenged ourselves to step more authentically into a life that really feels right and best for us. It was a huge year astrologically, and I'm so excited to talk about it with you today. Let's begin by talking about the nodes. The North Node moved into Pisces and the South Node into Virgo on January 11th, and they'll remain here until August of 26. So we've really been working with the nodes in Pisces Virgo all year. Wherever we have the North Node, we're invited to move toward the highest sides of the signature. And wherever we have the South Node, we're encouraged to let go of the shadow sides of that signature. So with the South Node in Virgo, basically all year since January 11th, we've been working on letting go of some of those more difficult sides of a Virgo signature in the zodiac of that archetype. So releasing perfectionism, the need to overplan, overschedule, overdo. Virgo energy can get so much done. But the shadow side of that can sometimes be too much focus on all the details, being too hard on yourself or others. Sometimes the signature of Virgo is thought of as critical, and I always think if people really knew how hard Virgo is on themselves, they wouldn't see it that way. So letting go of that a little bit. We've been working this year on releasing this feeling that we have to have everything worked out, everything planned out, and we have to go, 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 go. We're letting go of being too hard on ourselves. And through that, we're really learning how to not be as hard on others too. It really does naturally go hand in hand. It's very hard to be easier with others than you are with yourself. And wherever Virgo is in your chart, whatever house it rules, whatever planets or points you have here, there may be some reflecting to do about ways in which you've released that tendency to overdo, to over perfect in those life areas specifically. And then we also really want to put this together with the North Node in Pisces. So with the North Node, we're invited to bring in the higher sides of that signature. Spiritual connection, compassion. It actually complements the letting go of the Virgo so well because it's sort of about an ability to go with the flow, to not have all the answers, to allow your intuition to be the guidance, your emotions to be the guidance where and when possible. If something lights you up, following that. If something feels kind of bad, moving away from it when and where possible. And again, wherever this falls in your chart, it might be interesting to think about how you've been bringing that in with those particular life areas. I think I mentioned the nodes in almost every horoscope, but I know I mentioned them in September because September was when we had the eclipses. So checking out those September horoscopes by your rising sign would help you to know where these nodes were falling in your chart. And that's something else really important to mention here, the eclipses. So we had an eclipse in Virgo in March, and then we had two eclipses in Pisces and Virgo in September. So especially those September eclipses, since they both fell firmly within this axis, that might have been some sort of a peak in this process in some way. It might be interesting to think back over the year and think about how maybe this process came to a head or manifested into some tangible result or reached some sort of a turning point in September. And that may have been the case in March as well. In March of 25, we were also kind of wrapping up the lessons from the Aries Libra nodes. Those were concluding at that time. We had an eclipse in Aries, sort of closing out that signature that we worked with in 24 mainly. I'll just mention here really briefly about that since it was still going on at the beginning of 25, and I think it's significant with some of the other activity that comes up in 2025 with Neptune and Saturn that I'll talk about in a few minutes. That eclipse that we worked with in Aries in the beginning of 25, in March of 25. We were closing out the nodes in Aries Libra at that time. They'd been there for about 18 months, and we were learning to listen to our own voice again, releasing people-pleasing tendencies, inviting in that sense of our own destiny, that ability to sort of know what's right for us and to get started on it. And I think all of that is important to mention as well because it did kind of lead into the nodes in Pisces Virgo. I always think that the nodes are very, very easy to underestimate in astrology, and we should not do that. They are probably the most important thing to pay attention to. I have a lot of other things to reflect on here that I'm about to cover, but I do think that the nodes are maybe the most important, which is crazy because we have so many other really significant things, but especially sometimes in terms of your own life. We can just really feel that movement of the nodes through the chart. It brings an emphasis to those life areas, to that axis as it travels. And it's about the most reliable thing that I find in the chart sometimes. I think it's also just that it's a little bit more obvious in our experience. You know, we notice what's happening with the nodes. Sometimes I think it takes us a while to understand a Neptune transit, for example. While we're in the middle of it, it might be really significant, but we can't really understand it until later. And Saturn transits can be like that too, in my opinion. But you feel the nodes, you feel the eclipses, the same way we notice full moons, but really even more so. Next year in 26, the nodes will be moving into Aquarius and Leo. There will be quite a lot happening in those signs. Jupiter is moving into Leo too, so the focus is shifting, but we still have a little while. We still have until August of 26 working with this Venus Virgo signature, although the eclipses start to turn toward Aquarius and Leo very soon in February. There's so much ahead of us and behind us. It's so exciting. Before I move on to the next transit that I want to discuss in this 2025 reflection, I just want to say that I think that reflecting on astrology, doing a little post-diction, right, rather than prediction, is really important and can be really beneficial. Sometimes it doesn't feel as exciting as looking ahead, but I think it can almost be a more worthwhile process. We really get a lot from it. So I'm excited to be doing this today. And I really hope that you enjoy it too. Next, I have this chart here from late March of 2025. The Aries part of the chart, as I mentioned, really went through a lot in 2025, especially the beginning degrees. But I mean, Chiron has also been working through the end of the sign, so I chose this chart from late March, though, to talk about the Venus retrograde that occurred this year. It was from March 2nd to April 13th, and Venus was retrograde not just in Aries, but also in Pisces. And to me, this was a little extra significant just because of all the activity happening at this time on this axis. We have Neptune there at 29 degrees, which is actually exactly where Neptune is now as I record this in December of 25. We also have the nodes in Pisces, as I just discussed. Here's our Venus retrograde in Aries about to cross the line here, the threshold back over into Pisces. There also happened to be a Mercury retrograde in Aries at this time because why not? And of course, Saturn is there in Pisces as well. Wow, I'm noticing the way in which Neptune and Saturn are basically at the same exact place in December of 25 that they were in late March. We'll get to them in a second. I'll focus on this Venus retrograde here. I do think it was an extra significant Venus retrograde because it passed over that Aries Pisces threshold. And that was a real theme of this year in general, that point in the zodiac. It's a really significant point because we're looking at the very end of the zodiac, the final degrees of Pisces, and then the very beginning, the first degrees of Aries. There's always a pretty big change from one sign to the next. But this is extra true, of course, when we go from Pisces to Aries, or vice versa from Aries to Pisces. And we did both of those things many, many times in 2025. I almost think this Venus retrograde was sort of paving the way relationally for all of that work, sort of bringing Neptune and Saturn's work with that degree point, their work with that threshold, into our personal experiences a little bit more, into our relationships, into our values. I think relationships may have changed quite a lot this year. I think it's interesting that the nodes were recently across these points as well. I think that during the spring of 25 and perhaps throughout the year, there was a process of thinking about what we really want in relationships, what we really value, who we are, what's right for us, learning that listening to our own voice skill sort of a little bit more, putting it into practice in our relationships, in our experience, in our choices. Next year in 2026, we will have a Venus retrograde in Scorpio and Libra. And Mercury is interacting with it as well at the time, of course, keeping things exciting, just like Mercury did with this Venus retrograde. Very interesting. It might also be interesting to notice if you made some sort of relationship or style choice in March that you then ended up reversing. Sometimes something or someone can feel really right to us during a Venus retrograde, and then when it's over, you kind of come to your senses. I've seen where people think there's a spark with a friend. They think this is a platonic relationship, but then during a Venus retrograde, they're sort of a little interested, but then when it's over, it kind of goes away. And Venus also rules things like our appearance and aesthetics. So you might decide to paint a room an interesting color or do something different with your hair or something. And then later you look back and think that was a really bad choice. And you have to undo it when the retrograde is over. Kind of a more fun side of these retrogrades, not so serious, but interesting to think about nonetheless. I do think that the Scorpio Libra Venus retrograde in 2026 will be really interesting. It sort of seems particularly heavy there in Scorpio. Speaking of that Aries Pisces threshold, we did get a little taste of Neptune and Saturn in Aries in 2025. Although it really won't be until 2026 that this comes in full force. Neptune was in Aries from March 30th through October 22nd, and Saturn was in Aries from May 24th through September 1st. So they were both there for a few months over the summer. The summer was this really interesting time. We got a little bit of a glimpse of sort of the new era. A new glimpse of 2026, really. And then it was like in the fall, we got pulled back to 2024 to resolve some things before we could move forward. So if you know where Aries is in your chart, it would be a great time to make note of that. Big changes are coming in here. Saturn and Neptune opened up a whole new world for us this summer. It's like Neptune is bringing in the dream and Saturn is helping to make it real. Neptune expands beyond what we thought was possible into this sort of dreamlike realm. But Saturn is so responsible and practical and likes to have a plan, likes to bring things down into the real tangible experience, get the work done. So to me, this is a beautiful signature where we are breaking out of what we used to think was possible, going into a whole new level of experience. And I do think that we just got a little bit of a taste of it this summer. I don't think we'll really understand this until we get into 2026. Really, for a lot of the year, we were working with Neptune and Saturn in Pisces. They were doing some closing out work, some ending work, helping us let go of what we need to let go of before we can step into this new era. There was so much activity on that Pisces Aries threshold in 2025. Maybe things ending that we didn't think would end. Maybe some things that took a long time to let go of. Ways of seeing ourselves, ways of understanding the world, ways of relating to others. Saturn and Neptune working together allowed us to make changes, let go of things, welcome in endings that we never could have before. And I don't think that we'll really understand the significance of this until we understand what Saturn and Neptune are opening up in Aries. But you may be able to reflect on the Aries part of your chart. What little blooms started to open up this year? What new beginnings? Where did dreams start to feel real? Where did you start to learn to understand how to do something, how to make some goal real that you never had before? Where are you coming up with a plan? And I also think it's really great to reflect on Neptune and Saturn and Pisces and what endings came in, what you were able to let go of that you hadn't been able to let go of before in terms of relationships, ways of being in the world. And you might want to think about the Pisces part of your chart and what has been profoundly changing in that sector. I talked quite a lot about some of these transits in the October horoscopes. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, you might want to check those out by rising sign. I actually want to stay on this same chart to talk about Jupiter in Cancer. I think this is my favorite transit of the whole year of 2025. Jupiter entered Cancer in June of 25, and it will be there until late June of 2026. I think that a real peak in this process came in August when Venus was moving through this part of the chart too. But all of Jupiter in Cancer has really been so wonderful because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. This is its favorite place to be. Jupiter can sort of be extra Jupiter in this part of the chart. Wherever we have Jupiter transiting, we tend to have a little bit of a bigger target, is the way I think of it. Maybe because of the archer symbolism with Sagittarius. Anyway, it's like wherever Jupiter is traveling, wherever you fire your arrows, there's an easier chance of them hitting the target. The target is bigger there when Jupiter is transiting. So it might be really interesting to take a look at my August reports. The August horoscopes referenced this specifically, and watch that by rising sign if you know your rising sign. If not, your sun is the next best thing. And you might want to think about how your life has expanded in the Cancer part of your chart. How has it grown? Where have there been some positive movements? I love the way in which we've been sort of welcoming in more feelings of safety and security with this transit. It's my favorite part of it. It's like we've all been learning to really value that feeling of peace in a whole new way. And we've been working to bring it in all areas of our life, especially in our relationships. But it's not just about that. It's really about doing it for ourselves, finding that peace, finding that feeling of safety and security, and also leaning in the direction of relationships and experiences that help us feel that way, and listening to our inner guidance and moving away from ones that didn't when possible. It's not always that simple, that's for sure. But this is how these transits really work together. You know, we have that South Node in Virgo helping us to release the need to have everything figured out, the need to be perfect. And then we have Jupiter in Cancer helping us welcome in more feelings of safety and security. I think that was a really beautiful theme this year, Jupiter in Cancer. So it might be a great time to reflect on where you have Cancer in your chart and how that part of your life has expanded this year. There may have been a little bit of a delay first because at the very beginning of 2025, we were working with Mars retrograde through this part of the chart. Mars was retrograde here from December 6th through February 3rd. That might have brought some delays to this part of the chart. Might have felt like our efforts weren't getting us as far as we wanted them to. Maybe we didn't feel motivated or we didn't feel confident. It just was hard to make progress. In this Cancer part of the chart in the winter, in January and February, maybe even in March. But then as the year progressed, once summer hit, things started to open up. This was your experience, I would love to hear about it in the comments if you feel like sharing. I sort of noticed this for myself as a Libra rising. Cancer rules my 10th house, which relates to work and career. And it did sort of feel hard to make progress in the last winter. And then things did begin to open up in the summer. One of those things definitely being this channel starting to gain some more traction. And I'm just so grateful for my experience here with all of you, for the community that we're building, for this opportunity to share my interest in astrology with all of you, to learn from you as well, to connect, to just talk about life and our experience. I'd love to hear how Jupiter in Cancer has been working with you, and was there a little delay at first when Mars was retrograde here? Here I have a chart from the middle of August 2025. Remember, I was talking before when we were talking about Neptune and Saturn in Aries about how the summer was almost a little preview of 2026. And then in the fall and the end of 2025, we sort of went back to almost like a 2024 energy. Well, here on this chart, from the middle of August, we see another reason why I feel that way. The outer planet triangle, as I was calling it, I heard it called many things. It is a wedge, it is a triangle between Pisces and Neptune and Uranus. All three of these outer planets are in new houses and signs at this time. We have Uranus in Gemini, we have Saturn in Aries, and we have Pluto in Aquarius. Each of these planets takes many, many years to transit a sign. Pluto takes 20 years in some cases. Uranus is the slowest of the three, and it takes 7.5. So this is a big change, and it's sort of more about what's happening in the collective, what's happening in the world, than what's happening in our individual lives. But it's such a big, pervasive change that we all feel it in our lives too. The world is changing around us so quickly that it's changing our lives. It's changing how we work. It's changing how we live. It's changing relationships, finances, all kinds of things. One example I had of this was this Uranus in Gemini working in close connection with Pluto in Aquarius, bringing in AI on a whole other level. When Pluto first entered Aquarius in 2023, we saw ChatGPT and other AI tools come onto the scene. And I just feel like that all really increased as these connections came in, especially once Uranus in Gemini came online. Uranus was in Gemini just from July 7th through November 7th. It's back in Taurus now, but it will return to this place in 2026. Anyway, yeah, then we sort of took it to the next level with AI. We start to have all these deep fakes and AI psychosis and just all kinds of things coming onto the scene. And it is changing the economy and jobs and all of that. So I think that education will change in the future, the way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we relate to each other, the way we relate to our lives. We'll continue to talk about all of that. For now, I think it's interesting to reflect on the summer and what new came in your own life and in the world, how the world changing is sort of affecting the way your life is changing, and maybe vice versa. How are you contributing to those collective changes through your actions? My favorite part of this outer planet retrograde work actually occurred in October. In October, all three of these outer planets were retrograde. They were in the new signs, but they were retrograde, and it kind of gave us an opportunity to reflect in a different way. It might be interesting to check out those October reports, the October horoscope astrology report, if you're interested in learning more about that. We will definitely be working with this outer planet triangle more in 2026. It comes back. So, whatever potentials began to open up over the summer, that work is likely to continue in 2026. Part of why it's helpful to reflect. So, you can bring that understanding into the astrology thoughts and processing ahead. I also want to talk about the Mercury retrogrades that occurred in 2025 for a minute. We are back here looking at a chart from the last day of 2025, December 31st. Mercury is in Sagittarius at this time. Mercury actually had a retrograde here in November. Mercury was retrograde in the fire signs this year. Mercury was retrograde in Sagittarius in November, in Leo in August and July, and in Aries in March and April. I think that Mercury retrograde in fire signs is difficult because fire signs like to go fast, and Mercury just kind of puts the brakes on, throws the brakes on real fast, and makes it sort of move in the other direction, makes us slow down, review, revise something. I shouldn't say makes us. It's my understanding and many astrologers' understanding that these transits, they signify what's going on for us. It's not that the planets cause this. It's that we're all a little bit more connected than it seems, than is immediately obvious. I love sort of the old Alan Watts example of being both an apple and the apple tree, right? You're the ocean and a wave. So what's going on with Mercury is sort of going on within us as well. It just signifies that connection. That's my understanding, and it's okay if you have a different understanding for sure. But just to correct myself there when I was saying that Mercury was making us go back, it's not that. It's that Mercury is signifying that even though part of us wanted to move fast with certain things this year, sometimes we needed to slow down in these fire sign parts of the chart and review and revise and rest and sort of take our time and re-examine before moving forward again. Mercury retrogrades aren't major, but I think it's really most interesting to look at these larger trends, like the fact that Mercury was in fire signs the entire year of 2025. Next year, in 2026, Mercury will be retrograde in water signs. So that will be a very different experience. We'll have Mercury retrograde in Cancer and Scorpio and Pisces. Now I'm really thinking of that word resting. We're going to want to rest. It'll be more about reviewing and sort of reimagining our emotional lives, our intuitive lives, our compassion, our connections. Sort of less of an intellectual process in water signs, which I think makes it easier. But I think the energy might really slow down during those periods. It might feel sort of like trying to walk through the mud or something when trying to make things happen. There is a lot coming in 2026. Looking back on 2025 is a great way to prepare. I also just want to take a minute to thank everyone so much who watched videos this year. Special thanks to my members, to anyone who left a super chat, a super thanks. It all helped so much. It was so encouraging and supportive of me continuing this channel. It has been a blast, and I look forward to what lies ahead. Love to hear about your experiences in 2025 in the comments, and I look forward to continuing to talk through the astrology with you in the year and years ahead. Thanks so much for being here.